Welcome. We're just going to take a moment while everyone comes into the room. Hope you all are enjoying the day, the conference. For those that are in person, I was just saying, there's quite about 1,000 people in person here at the Ronald Reagan Building. And I think we have another 1,000 online today. So it's been a great day. People are very excited about being here, reconnecting. And I hope the people that are online have been able to connect with each other, as well as that, we have a virtual networking this afternoon. So hopefully you can all join that way too, and talk to people at the virtual tables. I am Julie Montgomery. I think we'll go ahead and get started, but I'm Julie Montgomery. I'm the Vice President of Membership and Partnership at SID-US, and we are here today at the first Learning Lab. As you can see, it's all about AI, ChatGPT, and other technology that's relevant to development. I know lots of people, I feel like ChatGPT comes up in so many conversations, including our strategic planning. We tried it actually. We're like, oh, let's do that. What would it say for our mission? And it did pretty well. I mean, we're not going to use it, but it was pretty incredible about what it came up with. But we're here today with Alexis Bonnell. So excited to have her here today. Many people probably know of Alexis. She's been in the field for over 25 years. And she's co-founded a lot of things. I was talking to her about how I just learned today that she co-founded the US Global Development Lab, which is pretty incredible. She also was a founding member of the Internet's Original Trade Association. She has worked in many different sectors. As I said, she worked at USAID, she worked with the UN, she was with Google, and right now she is the Distinguished Fellow for Technology at the Stimson Center. So she is, as many probably know, she's a technology evangelist. So she is really the perfect person to be talking about AI today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Alexis. Please, Alexis, over to you. And for those online, just real quick, please introduce yourself. Tell us where it looks like, sorry, I'm looking at the chat now. It looks like some of you are already introducing yourself. Perfect. Yeah, name, affiliation, and where you're coming from. All right, thanks, Alexis. I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Well, it's so great to see you all here. Thanks for coming on to such a cool topic. I am definitely biased. I love emerging technology and all of the things that it's doing in development. And today, really, my goal is to share, with you, to have an open dialogue. So I'm going to walk you through, kind of some of the socialization presentation around, what is ChatGPT? What is generative AI? Why should I care about it? But more than that, I'm really going to try to anchor us all into kind of a better understanding of what does this mean for us as individuals, as development practitioners, and just as people. And, my goal is simply that you walk away a little bit more confident that you know what it is, a little bit more confident that you know how to think about it, and hopefully we'll have a great conversation as well. My ask is, as you have questions, do not hesitate. Throw them into the chat, and Julie's going to be good about calling my attention to them as we go. But please really be active, really be curious and engaged. So with that, I'm going to try to share my screen. Julie, let me know if I've done this well. Everyone can see that?
Yes.
Awesome. And again, because I'm looking at the screen at the same time, I won't be able to see the chat. So Julie, just please call my attention to it. But what I first actually wanted to do is ask you all in the chat, what do you notice about this picture? So there's no right answer or wrong answer, but what do you notice in this picture? What do you see? What are people doing in this picture? At a station, yep, train station. What else are they doing? Waiting, yep. Nobody's on their phones. Yeah, that was quick catch. So take this picture and then juxtapose it, waiting at a train station, absolutely, with, let me see if I can get back into my thing, with that picture. What is different about this picture? And besides the fashion, analog clocks in the last one, right? And here, what do we notice about this one? Crossing a street, but what are people doing? Movement, younger people in general, all on their phones. Absolutely. Phones, texting, walking, right? What is really important about this is, I know it's going to be a bit surprising to hear this, but the first picture and the second picture were only taken about 5 years apart. So why I think it's really important, to start out with this is that we're going to talk a lot today about what AI has to do with our relationship with knowledge, right? And the reason why I think it's great to start out with this is that a lot of times technology can be disruptive, right? It can really, it can feel like a lot of change really quickly. But the reason I show this is because as a society, as a people, kind of collectively, as humanity, we often navigate this change really much more quickly than we give ourselves credit for. So just a thing to kind of anchor us in. Now, the other thing I wanted to highlight is how many of you, and again, play with me in the chat, how many of you feel like change is happening faster? And is it twice as fast as it used to? Is it 3 times as fast? Put in the chat how, if you, A, is it faster? And then B, how much faster? 10 times, yeah? Absolutely feels like that sometimes. Daily, yes, faster. So I wanted to show you this slide so that you're not crazy. You're actually absolutely correct. Change is happening faster. Diana, an elder millennial. Well, as an Xer, I also feel that change. But what I want to draw your attention to in this slide is that you see that when we look at the different industrial revolutions, which are often driven by technology, they tended to have these big spans, like 86 years, 99 years, 53 years. Now, what you're seeing here is that change horizon actually has gone down to 6 months to 1.2 years. And I want you to stop and think about that. So especially in the last couple of years with COVID, the average time horizon in government or philanthropy or
Oh, Alexis, I think you're on mute.
Okay, sorry. I had like a weird Zoom glitch. Can you still see my screen or did we lose that?
We lost the screen.
Okay, tell me if it's back.
Yes, back now.
Okay. So my point being that the average time horizon for change in our industry and international development was between 5 and 15 years. And so if you think about that, whether it was a policy, a program, a best practice, on average, those things would kind of evolve over 5 to 15 years. What's happened in the last 5 years is that time horizon shrank to the 6 months to 1.2 years. So I say that because when we think about a relationship with a technology like artificial intelligence, it's really important to understand that we are navigating this constant rate of change much faster. And that's something that actually impacts our work. Now, just to give you a sense of it, what that means is that in this particular slide, when I made it about a year or 2 ago, this was, these different things that were listed in the slide, those were things that had come out only in the last 6 months that now public servants, and different leaders were having to figure out, how they related to their profession. And you can imagine this same circle, having a lot of different categories of change and development as well. But all of this to say a lot of things are changing and it's changing quickly. The second thing that we're navigating together is actually this incredible flow of information rate. So, for those of you in the chat, I want you to guess, if you think about the type and the amount of information that you were expected to bring to a decision or to designing a great program, I want you to think about the amount of information that you would usually be using 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Now I want you to think about the amount of information you're expected to be using now. Now, for some of you, it's going to feel like a lot more, and you're absolutely right. And then for some of you, the other element is that it's going to be a lot more by thousands, right? It could be 1,000 times more information. It could be 100,000 times more information. But what's really important is that as leaders, we're navigating change faster than ever. And we're also navigating the expectation of being evidence-driven leaders, which means we have to navigate more information than ever. And as Deepak put in the chat, it's also about the quality of information, right? So in some cases, you know, people will argue that the quality is much higher and richer and much more diverse. In some cases, that quality can feel questionable, right? But all of that I'm posing for us because we really have to think, when we think about our relationship with artificial intelligence, what we're really navigating is our relationship with knowledge and how quickly, you know, we're being expected to exercise our relationship with knowledge in different ways. And so that's really helpful when we think about what AI should be, you know, for us as individuals and society and organizations as well. Sorry, I'm just trying to, okay. So the other thing, of course, when we think about that amount of information is just how much that's changed. So just drive home that point. If you look at, for example, the second bullet on this slide, and this slide is about 2 years old, over the last 2 years alone, over 90% of the world's data was generated, right? So again, when we think about the decisions we made only 5 years ago versus the decisions we might make now, that's a lot more information. And it's, you know, we're generating more and more insight, more information every day. And what's really matters about that is that I had to come to grips with the fact that as Alexis, right, as a human being, my processing capacity was about 120 bits per second. And the average conversation with someone, with one person, takes about 60 bits of that processing power. So I don't know how many of you are parents, but this is why when you have 2 kids trying to talk to you at the same time, it's, you know, does not compute. Like, we have to stop. One person gets to speak at a time. And that's really important because this attention system we have as humans is what protects us from being overwhelmed from information and you know, understanding how we attribute that attention. And so I want you to, you know, to draw your attention to the bottom of the slide. Really, the way I think about AI is, how do I use AI to be an ally in my information and knowledge consumption but still avoiding attention overload. So I think about AI, a lot of people obviously talk about it as artificial intelligence. I think about it for myself as augmented intelligence, meaning how am I adding a super processor to make more data-driven decisions or more information, process more information than I did before. So another thing that often happens, thanks, Julie. Another thing that often happens is that we tend, and I always say this word wrong, so someone feel free to correct me if you hear me struggling, just jump on and say it. But it's anamorphilization, meaning that we assign human characteristics, and most importantly, we assign human intent to machines and technology. So sometimes people will say things like, oh, you know, the AI wants to take my job, right? Or the AI, you know, wants to do this. And I think it's really important that when we hear those things, or when we hear ourselves kind of assigning intent, you know, to the AI, that we understand that the AI really isn't intentional in that way. And so it's important for us, again, to understand our role as arbitrators of knowledge and not necessarily assigning intent to technology. So how many people remember this? What is this? Go ahead and put in chat. What is this thing you're seeing on your screen right now? It's, yeah, Word, it's find and replace. Yep, Kevin used it today, still use it. You know, this was a game changer, right, in our relationship with knowledge and being able to update or edit the knowledge that we were consuming or creating, right? This idea of being able to go find and replace, absolutely huge. None of us can imagine probably having life without this. But the reason I've highlighted a few of these things is because when we think about AI, what AI is, and that is in essence a progression of many different tools and relationships that we had with knowledge previously. And so this is just one tool. Another, yeah, I still use it too. Now, what is this? I know many of us still use these. What is this that you're seeing on the screen? Word cloud. Yeah, bring it. Word cloud. Props to Gabriella. Yeah, Cynthia. Yep. So what was interesting about the introduction of word clouds was that they let us not only see volume, where we were processing amounts of information, but we were also calling out sentiment. right? We were also able to see what was important to people or more important to people. And this was a really, really powerful tool, right? That many of us still use. But again, think about the fact that this is a tool that we use, again, that categorizes our relationship with knowledge. And that's really, really important as we think about new tools like AI. All right, this one should not be a surprise to anyone. What is this? Search engine, yeah, Google search engine. Now, it may surprise many of you, the wonderful Google search, exactly. It may surprise many of you that Google was not the first search engine. It was actually the 11th search engine. And what it got right was it got right unleashing a very potent human characteristic. There is something that humans do better than any other species on the planet, or at least I'm going to project that they do it better than any other species. But what is the thing that Google absolutely unlocked? What is the human characteristic that all of a sudden it let us do? What do we do in Google? We get information, and we do that often by searching relevance, but often we do it by asking questions, right? And what that really does is what we're really doing with Google is we are exercising curiosity, right? We're exercising, exactly, Dana, we're exercising that curiosity. And Google let us do that in a particular way. And Google became as strong and helpful as it was because of the way that it let us have a relationship with curiosity. And of course, democratizing information from anywhere, right? Anytime. So if you think about it, that was a huge key in unlocking a new level, right? A new level of our relationship with knowledge. And so I want you to think about AI as kind of and especially generative AI, ChatGPT and Bard as part of that. So yes, it absolutely has lots of control about what you see, but part of the control is also based on how we search or how we query, right? And so that's going to come into play pretty critically with AI. Now, I want you to look at this, and I want you to, can anyone see, there's some of these headlines that are highlighted in green, some are highlighted in red. What have I done here with the headlines? The red ones are what? The red lines are negative, exactly. The red lines are here are bad things about AI. The green ones are generally, here is, here are what could be a good thing, and the yellow ones are neutral. The reason I show you this is because often when we're talking about a rate of change that happens so quickly, and when we're talking about so much information, what we can often do is tend to build an assumptive relationship with a technology based on the headlines we see about it. So what that means is that if you are constantly maybe happen to see negative headlines, you're going to have a negative perception of the technology. If you see generally positive headlines, you're going to have a generally positive perception of technology. And I think that this is really normal, but I would really say that it's also something where we have to be very careful not to simply rely on headlines to tell us, what or how, what a technology does, how it's relevant, or maybe where it comes into play in our work, or how we want to be thinking about it, be careful about it, etc. And what I mean by that is if you see mainly good things, that doesn't mean you don't have to be intentional or look for the risk. But it also means if you see mainly bad things, you may be missing the potential opportunity of the technology in your life, in your work, in your mission. So my real hope for you is that this time today really gets you to be a beyond the headline reader and really start using these tools and create a point of view for yourself, because your role, your work, your experience are all going to be leveraged. That tool is a manifestation of how you use it. And so really thinking about having that type of relationship. The other thing is, anyone know why I put a car picture on this slide? Why is there a car? Seems weird. Any ideas? Forwardism, I love that. Similar reaction to the car. Yeah, so actually, interestingly, there was a lot of bad press. Interestingly, if you go back and you look at the first 20 years of headlines around the car, you'll actually see two very juxtaposed kind of storylines. One, and I'm overgeneralizing, but one was kind of, this is a really dangerous tool, a toy of the rich, really dangerous, really deadly, killing people. The other was, of course, this is going to, be critical to how humanity and society advances, et cetera. But I point out the fact that that took 20 years of headlines, right, to kind of flush out. And so, again, when we're navigating technology much more quickly, much more compressed time zone, this is all the more reason on why we can't simply rely on headlines, and we need to start playing with these tools, exploring them so that we have a better understanding of how they might be relevant to us. And as Kelly put, it's absolutely, these technologies change over time. And it actually is that really active societal debate that calls out critical things that need to be solved in technology. So as an example, a couple of years ago, it was very obvious and very problematic that a lot of initial AI had bias. It wasn't seeing kind of Black or Latin like faces or skin tones or things like that accurately. And the fact that that was called out and started to be corrected changed not only the way that the AI worked, but it actually introduced entirely new types of camera lenses and phones and things like that that were more accurately representative, right, of all of the people, kind of in humanity. And so I say that because it's important to be able to call out flaws and to correct them quickly when we have this type of rapid change. Bias is still a huge issue, and we'll get into that a little bit. But in general, I think that that question of being able to raise that, see that, and expecting those things to be adjusted is part of what we have to kind of demand in technology. So what are machine learning and AI? So artificial intelligence, the way I really think about it is, it's really when computer systems can perform some tasks that normally require human intelligence interpretation. Those things can be things like visual perception, speech recognition, and some elements of decision kind of analysis. Machine learning is a subsector of that, and that's simply where we're asking a system or a computer to do something without being programmed by rules, but kind of being given different parameters. So we'll go into some examples. So one of the things that's really important is, can folks here tell me, what are you seeing in these pictures? Because all of these things contain critical elements of AI that already exist all around us. So what are some things here that people recognize or, have experienced? So my favorite, obviously, is curbside pickup. I'm a big fan of that. I don't really know how I would have gotten through COVID without that. But there are things like your bank alerts, spam, the mRNA vaccines that were created for COVID, weather forecasting, example, Alexa, Google Home. Yeah, all of those things, in essence, have been powered by AI for a long time. Many of you might not know, I'm giving a shout out to my former colleague, Aubrey Anthony, but even like 5 or 6 years ago, USAID had 22 different AI experiments happening, right? Which is amazing. And so oftentimes we think about AI as just, kind of coming on the scene, but actually development is one of the industries that has been using AI positively for quite a long time. All right, so let's talk about the kind of different ways that AI takes shape. So the first is classification. The second is prediction. The third is generation. So that's a lot of what generative AI is, kind of creating things. And then the fourth is understanding. So, classification might be being able to see an image, and I'll show you a tool on that. Prediction, in this case, being able to see floods. Generation, it's talking about creating music melodies, but it could also be creating a press release, right? Or a response to an RFP from, USAID or another player. So all of those types of things are in the zone. So when we talk about classification, that can be something, I don't know how many of you are aware of. There was a really cool development project where it used audio to actually detect the sound of chainsaws in the Amazon. Another idea of classifying images, it might be when you're using a map, or for example, in your Google Photos. I know for myself, it gives me, organizes one of my Chihuahuas into their own album, and a different Chihuahua has their own album. That's all in essence classification. So prediction is in essence when we're using data to be able to understand and do scenario modeling, prediction planning for me, this is going to be one of the biggest areas that you see kind of explode in development, right? And so whether that is being able to predict things like floods, disasters, it's also being able to understand what might the future state of things be. So as an example, right now with the Ukraine, hopefully when that country comes out of war, comes out of conflict, this will really be the first time that the world looks at how a country can rebuild using, generative AI or predictive AI, meaning that we may have different insights or information to say, well, should a port or should this particular area be the same thing it was before? Or when we think about rebuilding or reconstruction, might we use information in a different way? I love the Amazon parrots example, Marian, that's great. So that's just something to think about. Similarly, when we think about behaviors, sentiment, other types of issues are really coming into development focus, but also big things like supply chain, right? Being able to predict what civil unrest or what an election or, what a, potential monsoon might do to impact health supply chain as an example. All of these are areas where AI is critical in being able to help us take these massive amounts of information and overlay them together. So generation, these are two examples of being able to say, generation is also about being able to contextualize content. So in this case, the computer understands this is a person writing, a surfboard. It might be generating music. It might be generating what we see in like ChatGPT and Bard, and we'll talk more about that. And the final is language understanding. So there was the example of like Alexa or, hey, Google. Hopefully I'm not turning on any of those things in your houses by saying them. But really this idea of, asking questions, being curious, et cetera. Now, one of the things I want to call your attention to of why generative AI is so critical is because most of our relationship with information up until this point has required it to be structured. So when you think about the reports that you generate or the dashboards that you look at, in essence, the way that we have historically had a relationship with that knowledge is that we've had to organize it, right? So we've taken it in and said, what is it? Added tags, really organized, clean, structured it. And what is interesting about that is that number one, that's a really time-intensive, cost-intensive process. But number two, that means we only are able to organize about 20% of our organization's information. And if you think about that, that means 80% of our information is often trapped in things that have been hard to access. So for example, it's wonderful to do like a monitoring and evaluation report or to do a project lessons learned, but usually that information is locked in a PDF, which means it's much harder to be curious with that information. And this is where large language models or generative AI become really important because what they allow us to do is to start to unlock and to be curious with information that before we would have had to perfectly parse and organize. Now, I think the other thing that was a really interesting moment for me when I went from USAID to Google, I remember talking to like fellow Googlers about how important it was that we help people organize information, to make it useful and that we give them a better way to clean it and to structure it. But what someone said to me was like, well, you do Google searches, right? And I said, yeah, of course I do Google searches. They said, well, do you think that the results you get is because Google has taken, organized, cleaned, perfectly structured, parsed, and tagged all of the information in the world? And the reality is that, oh gosh, no, probably not, right? And that was my first introduction to this idea that information can be accessible, can be useful, without necessarily having to always be cleaning, structuring, and organizing it. So that's really a change in my, relationship with knowledge to say, wow, how is it that I unlock access to that 80% of knowledge? And I want to call your attention to something at the bottom of this, because I think this is really powerful and something that we in development kind of have to ask ourselves, like, can we do better? And that is that 87% of the development data that we create, those amazing, monitoring evaluation reports, those amazing project insights, that amazing research, 87% of it is often not used or seen by more than 3 people. Like, that's pretty crazy. And I can get you the stats. This came from a friend of mine over at Atlantic. But even if it's even if it's more than that, it's still not enough, right? So when we think about all of this knowledge we're intentionally creating and the amount of time, yeah, Megan, sounds about right. The amount of time that we have, part of this is how does AI allow us to have a more forward-leaning and a more curious relationship, and exercise that curiosity more with information that might have just, quite frankly, been hard to access or to use before that. So I wanted to give you this example because I know for a lot of people and for myself, there was like, there's a lot of these different things I hear: rules-based, process automation, machine learning, artificial intelligence. Like, what's the difference between them? And so this was my mom version of the easiest way to explain it to myself. So if you think about it, the swaddled baby, that is something where we're telling that's your normal enterprise, ERP system, or your normal system where you've gone in and you've said, okay, here are the fields. Here's the information I want to extract from those fields, and I get my report. So I think about that as like kind of a very swaddled and constrained, constrained baby, meaning like I've told that information what it is and exactly what I want from it. And I've limited it to producing that, right? Process automation is in essence where we still have constraints, but we're allowing the process to kind of run like a little bit more automated, a little bit more without as much constraint. The machine learning is actually where we're modeling within constraints, right? So this might be something where auto translation or other types of things where we're allowing the system to kind of draw inference and kind of make connections within a boundary, right? But still a little bit broader. And then finally, artificial intelligence. And this is what I would call supervised learning. Now, if you take nothing away from our time together, what I really want you to hear is like supervised learning, meaning that as someone using AI, you should have as much intent about what you're trying to learn or teach the AI or model as you expect the machine to, right? So, what would happen, in chat, if you could share with me, what would happen if any of us went to a park with our 3-year-old, dropped the 3-year-old off at the jungle gym and left? What would happen? They would absolutely cry. Jail. Yes, jail would probably happen. Chaos. Oh, she'd love it. Megan's 3-year-old would love it. But the reason I say that is because, when you think about AI, there has to be intentionality and there has to be engagement. It is not a set it and forget it tool. It is something where you need to be as curious about the information, kind of question it, have an active relationship with it. It is not a set it and forget it in the way that your normal report or rules-based system is. And so that's really important for us to understand. So the other thing that's really interesting about AI right now is, first of all, a lot of it already exists in development or commercially. So you actually don't need to reinvent the wheel. You're actually a lot more ready than you think. And that's where these tools have become much more user-friendly. But the final one, again, is that AI is a learning tool. And again, you have to be as willing to learn as you expect the tool to learn from you. So I'll give you an example on that. One of the things that's really interesting, we talked about bias before, is that people worry about using AI because of the bias or because they might get a biased outcome. One of the things I've loved using AI for is, quite frankly, to look at my information or to look at my program and say, have I been biased in the past, right? Sometimes by approaching the AI, you can actually see where your benchmark bias started and then actually correct it. And I mean programmatically historical bias, not the bias that the AI creates, but sometimes the AI can actually help you see where maybe you've been biased previously by serving up information at a scale that you just didn't have before. And that's a really important way to think about how we're intentional around things like bias. All right, a few more fun things. So this is one of the most important elements for anyone navigating AI, and I call it the intentionality line, meaning that not every AI use case is the same and actually shouldn't be handled the same. So in the middle, I put, you can imagine this is yourself, or you can imagine that this is any person, and where that person should be exercising their own human judgment or decision-making. So in some cases, on the far left in this case, when you're talking about a use case for AI that has very low impact on kind of a person or fairness, and I'll give you an example. This might be one of the projects I worked on was identifying rust on a ship, right? And so if I'm using AI to find a rust spot on a ship, that probably has a lot less to do with, someone's life, someone's fairness, et cetera, and can probably be used and governed in, a more light touch way. On the far right, I also worked on projects, for example, during COVID on things like unemployment benefit access. And that has a lot to do with making sure people get resources and making hard decisions and are taken care of, in the right way and in a fair way. And in that case, you want to be a lot more stringent and intentional around the governance, around that tool, around what it looks like. And you would probably want to actually put a human in the loop thing, meaning that what often happens in some of those cases is that the AI may be used to organize information, but it still might be presented to a human to take that information in and then to make a decision around it. So again, it's important to kind of understand like that one size fits all rules around how you or your organization use AI is actually probably not ideal. It's probably more ideal to have this real intentionality that's very tied to the use case specifically. All right, now, final one on this. So what is in the person's hand? Anyone gets 10 extra points if you can name the breed. Yorkie. Yes. Now, what is really critical is I like to talk about the fact that AI is needy, right? The same way I like with my 3-year-old on the playground, like if you think about AI as something that like has to be cared for, has to be guided. I want you all to suggest what would happen if we took this adorable Yorkie and put them in the same pasture that we would put the cow in and only checked on them as often as we checked on the cow. What would happen? What would happen if the poor Yorkie was turned out with the herd? Chaos for little baby. That is a nice way of putting it. Dies is probably much more likely. Poor puppy, right? But I want you to think about that. I want you to think about your relationship with AI as like the fact that it has to be interacted with, right? It has to be led, fed, organized, etc. It is not just something you send out to pasture and check on it, every 3 months and assume that it's going to be fine. So that idea of intentionality, that idea of care and like of active participation with AI is really important if you want to use it effectively in your organization. And this is actually one of the things for myself. This has been with ChatGPT, with generative AI. This is really what I have found my experience to be. And that is that as someone who's had lots of interns, some of them have been better than others. When I think about a really, really great intern, really amazing, what I would be able to do is to kind of give that intern an assignment. And if they got me kind of 60 to 80%, of great progress on that assignment, that is a great intern, right? That's like, wow, like huge progress. But would I take the product that intern creates and would I not look at it and then I would just put it out publicly, for example, as a government policy? What would happen to me if I did that? If I just took the product of the intern and then just put it out and didn't exercise my experience, my discretion, my accountability and responsibility, what would happen? I'd get fired. Yes, I would probably get fired. I like how realistic this group is. I'd lose credibility. I would have problems. They wouldn't know what they were doing. Exactly. And so the way I look at generative AI is that it can help me organize information. It can help me access more things, etc. But it is still on me to look at that, to apply my experience, my 30 plus years, as Julie pointed out, in development, to really say, is this enough? Is this accurate? Do I want to check it, etc. And so that's really where the best way I can frame it is as I've been on this AI journey and generative AI for about the last year, I realized something different about the role that I played. And what I realized is that previous to ChatGPT or Bard or these generative tools, yeah, I would get put out to pasture with the cows. I love that. Previous to that, I really valued, and I think we all do, I valued my ability to create. Right? That idea of going from scratch to kind of creating something. And I may take in a lot of resources, et cetera, but a lot of that figuring out what was in that last mix was creation, right? I was creating something. And for those of us who work on, communications or RFPs or, research or any of these types of things, where words are our tools, we really value and find identity in our ability to create. So what I had to do was to realize that my new relationship with knowledge, one of the opportunities I have with generative AI is to say, you know what, maybe my role will shift slightly from being, maybe before it was, 80% creation and 20% curation. Now my relationship might be more 60% curation, 40% creation. And what's interesting about that is that it's not necessarily a bad thing. Whether I'm creating or whether I'm curating, I am still using my experience, my understanding, my discretion, all of those things. I'm just applying them slightly differently. And so, for example, what is a fabulous test to run, in case any of you ever are looking for something to do with a team, is if you pick a subject matter and you get a group of, of your team, let's say it's 6 people, and you say, okay, I want us all to go write a sample policy paper using ChatGPT, for example, on a new policy around charging for plastic bags. Okay, so that's something that's happened recently. What's very interesting is that the way that you frame that, the parameters you give it, the way you develop your query in ChatGPT is going to usually be different than someone else because it will be influenced by your knowledge, by your experience, by your discretion. And what's really fun is to go and do that separately and then come back and look at each other's queries. Look at the differences in the output documents that each person got because of how they structured that information, because of what they asked, because of the compound nature of what they asked the large language model to consider. So I say that to you because I think a lot of times it can be really hard to kind of understand what is my relationship with this technology, what does it mean for me, and how can I take advantage of it without sacrificing, again, that unique experience, that deep technical expertise, and other things that you have. So quickly, I'm going to show you just a few tools. I'm going to kind of show you a few, encourage you to go back and use them. So Teachable Machine, ChatGPT, and you'll see, I'm happy to share this deck, but at the bottom, some of the command examples that you can try. Bard and Dolly. These are all 4 really easy ones that I'd encourage you to try. So in this one, I kind of said, hey, make a monkey face out of fruit and fruit pieces. That's what I got out from it. But what I will do also is I wanted to show you this tool. So bear with me really quickly because I want you all to see, and I know we only have a couple minutes, but I'm going to stop sharing this and I'm going to show you one of these tools in action. Can you see Teachable Machine? Is that on the screen right now, Julie? Can you say for me?
No.
It's not. Okay, let me just go back to this then. All right. Okay, can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I'm just going to walk you through really quickly what a tool like this looks like and what it does. I'm going to stop my video so that I can use the video on the tool. Give me 1 second. All right, so I click Get Started. And Julie, you can still hear me, right?
Yes, yeah.
Perfect. I'm going to click an image and I'm going to do a standard image model. I'm going to show it a few things. So I'm going to show it, because it's on my desk, a tumbler. I'm going to open the webcam. I'm going to hold my tumbler to the webcam and I'm just going to record, right? Getting lots of pictures of what the heck is that. And for my second class, and I want you to keep in mind, has anyone seen me tell the program, and now I'm taking a picture of me, so I'm going to be the other element. Now, has anyone seen me tell the system what I am? That I'm a human, that I'm, female, that I'm any of these things, or what a tumbler was? No, right? I didn't do any coding. I'm going to go ahead and train the model. Now, did anyone see me code anything or do anything super cool? No, because I can't code, right? But I'm showing you this because this is how easy this is. So when I talked about writing a program to detect rust on ships, all we did was upload a whole bunch of photos of rust and a whole bunch of photos without rust. And then this model kind of trained it. So what you're seeing right now with the pink line is you're actually seeing that the model is telling me it's 100% confident that what it sees on the screen right now is me, right? So literally, now what happens here? Oh, it's not sure, right? It's seeing both things. But I'm showing you this because this has been used for things like detecting locusts in a field, right? Having a local farmer take a picture and know what type of pest it might be seeing, or being able to understand post-disaster, pre-disaster images and being able to detect differences. So this is just one example. It's completely free. It's completely open to use, and hopefully it's really, it's helpful for you all to play around with. I know Julie's been kind enough to put a bunch of links in the chat. So if it's okay, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions now. Julie, I don't know if you want to draw my attention to anything in particular, but first of all, in the chat, is this helpful? I really wanted to, to make this feel more accessible, to understand why it might be worth paying attention to, how it might be relevant to development, and most importantly, to encourage you to play with it. Okay, good. Analogies are helpful. Awesome. But what questions do we have, Julie?
So there really isn't that many questions. There was a conversation about citing. Well, first, do you have to reference and cite ChatGPT, and then some conversation around how does ChatGPT can it cite its own courses? And it looks like someone on here tried to do it, and it looks like it does not cite sources. But what do people need to reference and cite ChatGPT if they're using it? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I actually did a LinkedIn post. Did I lose you? Can you still hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Great. Can you see my screen? Can you see the picture?
Puppies and
so this was in Teachable machine, just really quickly. You can imagine that one of these pictures is a lot of my Chihuahua and one of them is of muffins, right? And so you can imagine that there would be confusion, and that this is where training, right, and spending time with the model to allow it to see these nuances is really important, similar to the parrots in guacamole example as well. But, to that question, I think you're going to see a couple things in the future. So the first, and I'm trying, okay. I'm getting can you still hear me? I'm getting some Zoom notices.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. So in essence, when we think about the sources, I think that there's a couple things. So I did a LinkedIn post, and one of the things I put as my 10th factor is that if I use generative AI to create something, I will put at the bottom of that document, much like any type of footnote, assisted by AI. Right? Just so I don't necessarily call out every single element, but I will make a note. This is my own practice, and I think it's going to become more and more common to, in essence, put some type of reference. I choose to use assisted by AI as a note in the bottom. As far as sources, it isn't necessarily so much that ChatGPT makes up sources unless you tell it to. So this is one of the interesting things. If you tell generative AI to make something up, it will get creative and make something up. Generally speaking, it will pull from the collective knowledge set that it is aware of and that it has access to. What you will probably see in the near future more and more of is, and I'm not going to speak for any particular tool, but I know there's a lot of discussion about citing references being added to tools as well. And so you'll probably see more of that. My general rule is that if I'm using ChatGPT for something that is going to include facts or figures, I will go and do that extra step of curation and make sure what it has given me I can cite or resource. If I'm writing something like a press release or something that is more about a future state or a program that I know and isn't necessarily dependent on hard facts and figures, then I may have to do less of that, fact checking or creation. But that's just kind of a good common practice, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Okay, well, I don't think there's any more questions. And we're right at time. So I just, I wanted to say thank you, Alexis. There was, so much useful information. I learned so much. And this idea about caring for AI and having an active relationship with AI, that's, I've never thought about it that way. So I'm definitely going to think about that going forward. Here, let me start my video real quick. But I wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. And just a few reminders to wrap up. Please don't forget to fill out the survey at the end of the day. Your feedback is really important to us. The next session is going to be starting at 3. There's 2 that I wanted to highlight. Alexis is actually going to be speaking at another panel, a virtual panel discussion on artificial intelligence, breaking or building barriers in international development and DEI. That's going to be happening at 3. The other option that might be of interest is our next learning lab, which is using feedback to shift power and development. So those are 2 things coming up at 3 o'clock on virtual options. But please take a moment. Thank you, Alexis. That was really, really wonderful. And we will be posting the recording on the platform. Alexis, if you're willing to share your slides, that would be awesome, and I can post them up on the platform as well. So thank you again for joining us, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and go see Alexis speak at her next panel discussion if you want to learn more on AI and its relationship to DEI, or come to the next learning lab with another Alexis.
Yeah, and don't be afraid. Go and play and figure out these tools for yourself. I promise you it'll be an awesome journey. It can be super fun, and hopefully you'll have more confidence in how it can make development even better. Thanks so much, Julie. Thanks all.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.